The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Leng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am taking a quick look at For the Greater Good. It is the third Mythos pack in the Circle Undone cycle. Fantasy Flight games unveiled For the Greater Good last Friday, and the scenario and the player cards build on what we've seen in previous Mythos packs. There are minor spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We are headed back to the Silver Twilight Lodge, so let's get started. Let's talk about what we know so far about the plot of The Circle Undone. The cycle begins with the investigators attending a charity event at the Silver Twilight Lodge on French Hill. 4 Arkham citizens disappear during the event, and the investigators promptly delve into the city's dark past in the hopes of finding them. The trail leads the investigators to Arkham's famed witch house. FFG's preview of the secret name suggests the investigators leave the house a little worse for wear. Now, I'm not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds like we do have to fight Brown Jenkin and or Keziah Mason during this scenario, so I wouldn't be surprised if the place gets a little bit wrecked in the process. After exploring the witch house, the investigators check reports of ghost sightings and strange activity on Hangman's Hill. After exploring the environs of the notorious graveyard, the investigators learn there have been more strange sightings and several more disappearances. Desperate for answers, the investigators return to the scene of the crime, Silver Twilight Lodge. Now, the Order of the Silver Twilight and the Silver Twilight Lodge are integral to the plot of The Circle Undone, so what do we know about them exactly? According to the Arkham Horror Wiki, Silver Twilight Lodge is an adaptation of the Hermetic Order of the Silver Twilight, which is the primary antagonist in the classic Call of Cthulhu campaign, Shadows of Yog-Sothoth. That name, in turn, is a play on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a magical order in Britain in the late 19th century and early 20th century that counted poet William Butler Yeats and authors Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood among its members. Now, FFG has been fleshing out the Order of the Silver Twilight and the Silver Twilight Lodge in many of its Arkham Files products, including the Arkham Horror board game, the Call of Cthulhu LCG, and Elder Sign. In the Gates of Arkham expansion for Elder Sign, the Order is described as a secretive organization with a presence in Arkham dating back far beyond living memory. Most Arkham citizens can only guess what goes on behind the closed doors of the gabled Victorian Silver Twilight Lodge, but the ubiquitous rumors tell of black magic and bloody occult rites. Members of the occult include many of Arkham's elite, and who are bound by strict vows not to speak of their dark dealings or reveal the Order's ancient mysteries. In the Arkham Horror board game, the Silver Twilight Lodge and the Witch House are 2 locations players may visit in the French Hill district. Investigators who explore the lodge may encounter all manner of strangeness, including magic spheres, glowing green doors, books, and other small objects that appear to fly around the room of their own accord, a small, ugly statue of some horrific tentacled creature, and a strange, compelling oil painting of an alien landscape. Players may also encounter the leader of the Order of the Silver Twilight, an ancient wizard named Carl Sanford. If Sanford takes a liking to you, he may offer you membership in the Order. According to the Order of the Silver Twilight expansion for the Call of Cthulhu LCG, the Order pursues power for its own sake and at any cost. One of the Order's maxims is knowledge above one's rank is punishable by death. Investigators who earn a Silver Twilight membership have access to the Lodge's inner sanctum, which FFG describes as a demimonde of shadows and conspiracy, an unplumbed depth of cosmic power and forbidden knowledge. The inner sanctum is also where members witness great power and great evil during monthly rituals fueled by sacrifices. Many of these sacrifices come from the lower ranks of the Order. The inner sanctum is not a place for the faint of heart, and the Order is always on the lookout for any hint of weakness or betrayal from its members. Now, if you accept Sanford's invitation to join the Order, he may introduce you to the Black Man, who is believed to be an avatar of Nyarlathotep. As we know from the preview for the secret name Mythos Pack, the Black Man also has ties to Keziah Mason. Clearly, Sanford and the Order are mixed up in something nefarious, and I wouldn't be surprised if investigators need to enter the inner sanctum and encounter Sanford himself during For the Greater Good. Fantasy Flight's preview article suggests that the choices the investigators made toward the beginning of the campaign will come back to haunt them in For the Greater Good. It appears the investigators will have a choice to make at the beginning of the scenario: trust the elite members of the Lodge and ask for their help to piece together the evidence you've collected, or sneak into the Lodge Manor on French Hill to learn what its members are plotting. Based on what we know about the Order of the Silver Twilight and the Silver Twilight Lodge, it seems pretty clear to me they are up to no good. Heroic investigators will likely choose to sneak into the manor under cover of darkness. Sneaking suggests agility and evasion will be paramount during For the Greater Good. That said, I am awfully curious about what happens to investigators who choose to make a deal with the devil and cooperate with the Lodge. The title of the Mythos Pack hints that some sort of sacrifice is required to ward off some great evil. Here's hoping the investigators aren't the ones getting sacrificed by the Order. FFG's preview article goes on to spoil Agenda 1A and Act 1A of the scenario. Agenda 1A, the Hierophant 5, has a doom threshold of 8, which is fairly generous. It has the following forced effect: when you defeat a Silver Twilight enemy, you leave behind some evidence of the scuffle. Move 1 doom from each enemy at that location to the current agenda. The forced effect on Agenda 1A raises a bunch of questions. For example, are Silver Twilight enemies aloof, like the mobsters in The House Always Wins? That would certainly make sense, given that cooperating with the Lodge is an option for investigators. I'm also wondering when you place the doom on Silver Twilight enemies and whether that doom counts when you check the doom threshold during Step 1.3 of the Mythos phase. It's unclear to me when you place the doom on the enemies, but chances are it does count against the doom threshold, given the high doom threshold on Agenda 1A. The wording of the forced effect is another strong hint that agility and evasion will be a priority during For the Greater Good. If you go into the Lodge guns blazing, you are likely to place a lot of doom on the agenda, and it won't take long for you to break through that 8 doom threshold. Now, Act 1A Warm Welcome doesn't give us much to go on besides the flavor text, which we've already discussed. It mentions the investigators spoke to the Lodge president during a previous visit. Now, I don't know the identity of the Lodge president, but I'm guessing it's probably Joseph Meiger, who was mentioned in the Circle Undone spoiler article. Investigators need 3 clues per investigator to advance to Act 1B, which is pretty typical. We've seen that level in many scenarios in the past. Now, FFG's preview article also spoils 4 player cards, and all 4 are upgrades for the gold dual class cards that are coming out in the secret name. Rogues and Survivors will receive upgrades for Tennessee Sour Mash, while Seekers and Mystics will receive upgrades for Scroll of Secrets. Now, the Level 0 Tennessee Sour Mash is a 3-cost Rogue and Survivor asset with a Willpower skill icon and the item and illicit traits. It uses 2 supplies and has the following free triggered ability: exhaust Tennessee Sour Mash and spend 1 supply. You get +2 willpower for a skill test on a treachery card. It also has the following action: discard Tennessee Sour Mash. Fight. You get +3 combat for this attack. The rogue version of Tennessee Sour Mash is a 3-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. It has willpower and combat skill icons and the item and illicit traits. It is fast and uses 2 supplies. It has the following free triggered ability: exhaust Tennessee Sour Mash and spend 1 supply. You get +3 willpower for a skill test on a treachery card. It also has the following action: discard Tennessee Sour Mash. Fight. You get +3 combat and deal +1 damage for this attack. The Survivor version of Tennessee Sour Mash is a 2-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. It has willpower and agility skill icons and the item and illicit traits. It uses 3 supplies and has the following free triggered ability: exhaust Tennessee Sour Mash and spend 1 supply. You get +2 willpower for a skill test on a treachery card. It also has the following action: discard Tennessee Sour Mash, fight. You get +3 combat for this attack. If this attack succeeds against a non-elite enemy, automatically evade it. Now, I wasn't overly impressed by the level 0 Tennessee Sour Mash when it was spoiled. While I like the idea of using the mash as a weapon after you finish using it to shore up your willpower, as well as the fact that it doesn't take up any slots, the card seems kind of expensive and a little bit narrow, as it affects only willpower skill tests on treachery cards. The card is clearly targeted at low willpower rogues and survivors, such as Finn Edwards and William Yorick, but both of those investigators, I think, have cheaper, more versatile tools available to them that essentially do the same thing. Finn, for example, he can play You Handle This One, Lucky, and Logical Reasoning if he's worried about his lack of willpower and sanity. That said, Finn can fetch the mash with his signature event, Smuggled Goods, which is something he cannot do with the other 3 cards. He can also play it as a fast asset with the rogue asset, Fence, from Threads of Fate. Now, survivors such as William York can play Cherished Keepsake for free. He can also recur it with his special ability, or Resourceful if necessary. Of course, survivors can also play Lucky too, which is a lot more versatile than Tennessee Sour Mash, since you can use it on any skill test, not just willpower skill tests on treachery cards. Now, it's worth noting that Finn can take either upgrade for Tennessee Sour Mash, since both have the illicit keyword. If an investigator spends 3 experience points to upgrade to the rogue version of the card, they get an extra combat skill icon, the fast keyword, +3 willpower instead of +2, and an extra damage if you use the Tennessee Sour Mash as a weapon. Judging by the art, you also get a free shot glass with every bottle of Tennessee Sour Mash, which I think is a nice touch. I like the addition of the fast keyword and the bonus damage. The ability to get a card down on the table without taking an action is always welcome in this game. If you're playing a rogue deck that uses Fence, you also get to save a resource when you play Tennessee Sour Mash, since it's already fast. Meanwhile, the ability to do a little extra damage is always helpful, although it's worth noting here that, of course, this is a one-shot weapon. The upgrade is nice, but it's nothing earth-shattering. The biggest problem I have with this card is that it does cost 3 experience points, which seems on the high side to me. I don't see myself spending 3 experience points on the mash when I can pick up amazing cards such as Lola Santiago, Lupara, Streetwise, or Sure Gamble for the same price. If Finn or a survivor spends 3 experience points to upgrade to the survivor version of Tennessee Sour Mash, they get to play it for 1 less resource. They also get an extra agility skill icon and the extra supply. The free triggered ability is the same. The mash gives survivors the same combat bonus, but if the attack succeeds against a non-elite enemy, it automatically is evaded as well. Now, the biggest change to the survivor version of Tennessee Sour Mash is the addition of the auto-evade if your attack succeeds. Now, we've seen this type of effect before on Stunning Blow, a survivor skill from Threads of Fate. The biggest difference between the effects, besides being different card types, is that Stunning Blow works on any enemy, while the Tennessee Sour Mash works only against non-elite enemies. I'm not really sold on playing Tennessee Sour Mash in Survivor, and the addition of the evade doesn't really change my mind. I guess William York could use it since evasion options are somewhat limited for the investigators who are more focused on fighting. Sometimes flight is better than fight, and having that ability to evade an enemy is always helpful. However, I think in the long run, I'd prefer to have the cheap sanity from Cherished Keepsake on the table. Besides, I don't see myself paying 3 experience points for this, which, as you know, is at the top end of the Survivor experience point scale, when you can get cards like Will to Survive and True Survivor for the same price. Now, Seekers and Mystics receive upgrades for the level 0 version of Scroll of Secrets. It's a 1-cost Seeker and Mystic asset with an intellect skill icon and the item and tome traits. It enters play with 3 secrets, and it has the action Exhaust Scroll of Secrets and spend 1 secret. Look at the bottom card of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck, then either discard that card, add it to its owner's hand, place it on the bottom of its deck, or place it on the top of its deck. The Scroll of Secrets takes up a hand slot. Now, the Seeker version of Scroll of Secrets is a 1-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. It has 2 intellect skill icons and the item and tome traits. It uses 3 secrets and takes up a hand slot. It has the following action: Exhaust Scroll of Secrets and spend 1 secret. Look at the bottom 3 cards of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. You may discard one of those cards. You may add one of those cards to its owner's hand. Place the rest of those cards on either the top or bottom of their deck in any order. Finally, the Mystic version of Scroll of Secrets is a 1-cost asset that costs 3 experience points. It has a willpower and intellect skill icon and the item and tome traits. It uses 4 secrets and takes up a hand slot. It has the following action: Exhaust Scroll of Secrets and spend 1 secret. Look at the top or bottom card of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck. Then either discard that card, add it to its owner's hand, place it on the bottom of its deck, or place it on top of its deck. As I mentioned during my preview of the secret name, we've seen cards that look at cards on the top of an investigator's deck or the encounter deck before, notably Scrying from the core set and Alyssa Graham from Undimensioned and Unseen. Besides Scroll of Secrets, there are only 2 cards that target the bottom of a deck in really any meaningful way, those being Alyssa Graham again and Wendy's Amulet, her signature card from the core set. An investigator who picks up the Seeker version of Scroll of Secrets gets an extra intellect skill icon and the ability to manipulate the bottom 3 cards of the deck rather than just the bottom 1. This version of Scroll of Secrets reminds me a lot of Old Book of Lore from the core set. The scroll is more flexible in that it does let you target either an investigator deck or the encounter deck. It also gives you more options to manipulate the cards that you see. It's also worth noting that the scroll lets you discard a weakness that you find there, while the Old Book of Lore simply lets you shuffle it back into your deck. Now, I'm not sure it matters all that much whether you look at the top or bottom 3 cards of a randomized deck. I think it's all the same to the deck. I guess that could become more important if we see more effects that target the bottom of the deck. If you need a secret, of course, you can use Enraptured and Truth from Fiction to generate 1 or 2 additional secrets, respectively. The scroll has the tome trait, and it requires an action to trigger it, so I don't expect to see it all that often outside Daisy Walker decks. And as you know, Daisy gets that free action to use tomes, so she's not hurting her tempo too bad by taking that action. Like the other upgrades we've seen in this pack, the scroll costs 3 experience points, so it's competing with the likes of Archaic Glyphs Guiding Stones, which is really central to Kluver decks, and of course Higher Education, which is huge in pretty much every Seeker who can take it. The Old Book of Lore, on the other hand, is a level 0 card, so it really requires nothing from you other than to stick it in your deck at the start of the campaign. Now, investigators who spend 3 experience points to upgrade to the Mystic version of the scroll get an extra willpower skill icon, an extra secret, and the ability to look at the top or bottom card of any investigator's deck or the encounter deck, not just the bottom. This version of Scroll of Secrets reminds me of either level of Scrying. Scrying uses charges rather than secrets, and it targets only the top of an investigator's deck or the encounter deck. Scrying allows you to look at 3 cards, not just 1, but you may only reorganize those cards. You don't have the option of discarding the cards or placing it on the bottom of the deck like you do with the scroll. The scroll also takes up a hand slot rather than the arcane slot, which is getting fairly crowded for Mystics at this point in the game's life cycle. Now, I'm not entirely sure which Mystic or off-class Mystic would be interested in a card like this. It does take an action to trigger the scroll, and I'm not convinced that taking an action to manipulate what amounts to one card is really worth it in the long run. You'd probably need to combine this card with other deck manipulation effects, such as Alyssa Graham or Norman Withers' signature asset, Split the Angle, to really get the most out of it. And even then, it does seem quite slow. You might have time for this sort of manipulation in multiplayer, but I tend to avoid it in solo and just focus on beating the scenario as quickly as possible. That's going to do it for my preview of For the Greater Good. I really like the sound of this scenario. I do enjoy playing decks that are built around the evasion mechanic, so the idea of sneaking into the Silver Twilight Lodge sounds like it's right up my alley. If sneaking isn't your thing because you've got the agility of Leo Anderson, you can always ask the members of the Order of the Silver Twilight for help. They're likely a bunch of evil bastards, and the price you'll pay for it will likely be far too high, but sometimes you do need to make a deal with the devil if you want to make any headway against the mythos. Now, someone on the forums mentioned that that help might come in the form of extra chaos tokens in the chaos bag. Everybody loves those. We've seen this sort of thing happen before at the end of the Miskatonic Museum or throughout the Forgotten Age cycle, depending on who you helped there. So I certainly wouldn't rule it out here. So get those. You might want to dust off some more, maybe cultist tokens, since the Order of the Silver Twilight is a cult after all. As for the upgraded player cards, I'm not terribly excited about them, to be perfectly honest. The Rogue version of Tennessee Sour Mash and the Seeker version of Scroll of Secrets seem like the best of the bunch to me, but they're not going to dramatically change the game or spawn new deck archetypes either. Unfortunately for those cards, at 3 XP, they are often competing with cards that do just that, so that makes them seem even less compelling. I guess we'll find out whether we're going to receive upgrades for the other gold cards that were spoiled in the secret name as the cycle unfolds. Designer Matt Newman is breaking new ground with the dual class cards and their upgrades in this cycle, so I expect them to be a little more conservative out of the gate. Whether conservative translates into unplayable is something that you will have to decide for yourself. I certainly don't think any of the cards spoiled in this Mythos pack are unplayable. I think they may be a little too weak to make the cut, especially at that 3 experience point cost. There are just other cards that are going to be far more impactful at that level. But who knows? This is the 3rd Mythos pack in the cycle. We've got a deluxe box and 2 other Mythos packs to see before these cards come out, and the card pool will grow, and perhaps there will be cards in those packs that will change our perceptions of these ones. So stay tuned. We'll see once this pack is released where we stand. That's going to do it for this episode. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.